Welcome back to Utility Sports, and in today's video, we're going to be covering something we haven't historically done on the channel. Completely new kind of video here, and you guys are going to have to bear with me a little bit as I break down part of what I'm doing with this video. It's a little bit different than a normal power rankings video, and I want to explain exactly what's going on in this video so you guys can follow along and then give me your thoughts and insights and your own analysis, because of course, this is subjective. Everything that I say is my own opinion. As of the day I'm recording this, everything is subject to change. The buyout market could flip some things around too, in my opinion, but as of right now, I feel pretty confident in the takes I put in this video, and it's extremely tough to exactly nail down everything that I believe. I spent a lot of time going through these teams, breaking down my thoughts and why I have certain teams making it further. And in this power rankings video, which is NBA post trade deadline edition, there's a lot to break down. So let's jump into it here. If you guys are new, subscribe. Also leave a like on today's video, and let's get into it here now. There's levels to this. I don't want to sound too much like a frat guy, but there are levels to these things. And looking at these levels here, the ones that I've designated are in this screen right now for you on the graphic. First one, praying for ping pong balls. I think there is definite teams that are just praying for ping pong balls at this point. Then we have the fun and frisky teams. We have teams that are play-in teams that are going to get bounced in the play-in tournament. We have the first round exits, which are 16-9. Then we have the second round teams, which are ranked 8-5. The conference finals teams, which are, of course, the third and fourth best team in the league. In a vacuum, of course, sometimes the West is a little bit deeper, sometimes the East a little bit deeper. But in a vacuum, you know, they technically would take third and fourth place. And then my finals favorites, the two teams I think are going to make the finals. And of course, this is before a lot of buyouts have really occurred. We know that Tristan Thompson is going to be going to the Chicago Bulls. And we do know of a few other players that are going to be out in the buyout market, like Goran Dragic. We don't exactly know where he's going. I do have a video up on the channel of where I think he'll land. And I do factor that a little bit into here. But at the end of the day, I don't think Goran Dragic really moves the needle too much for my finals favorites at this point. Let's move into it here now with the teams that are praying for ping pong balls. I've got 6 teams on here. So essentially this would be 30-25. The teams that I think are going to be really hoping that the ping pong balls bless them this NBA lottery season. And of course, I think a lot of them are no-brainers here. When you look at the Detroit Pistons, of course, last year got lucky. We're able to grab Cade Cunningham first overall. Also got the Houston Rockets on here, another team very well set up for the future in terms of draft assets and capital. Oklahoma City Thunder, no one does it like them when it comes to draft assets and capital. Josh Giddey's been playing really good basketball as well as of late. 3 straight triple doubles, the only teenager to ever do that in NBA history, and he has the same number of triple doubles as a teenager as Luka Doncic. I really love his game, but the Thunder still as a team, a little bit of a ways to go for them to really get into the playoff buzz mix. And at this point, I think that they're hoping that they could land number 1 overall and add a really talented forward pairing to their young guards at this point. The Pacers as well. Tyrese Haliburton was a phenomenal move for them, but also just realistically here, this Pacers team, after trading LeVert, trading Sabonis, they're not going to win a ton of games. So I think, very possible a team that hasn't drafted in the top 9 since 1989 is looking for a chance to be the number 1 overall pick. Orlando, they've been one of the worst teams all year. No surprise that they're on here. And then the Blazers. I know this is a little surprising because they've won 4 straight games after making some moves of Norman Powell, Robert Covington. You also traded out CJ McCollum. It's a remake there in Portland. They've been winning games, but ultimately when it comes down to it, I think that they're going to be hoping that the lottery blesses them, not only with their own pick, but the pick from the New Orleans Pelicans. And now, as we move forward, of course, these teams here are not going to make too much noise down the stretch of the season, in my estimation. And now we get to the fun and frisky teams, which this group is very interesting. These are teams that are hoping to make the play-in, and I think there is some hope here that at least 1 or 2 of these teams could slip in there. But for the most part, I think they're just going to be fun to watch on NBA League Pass. Washington Wizards, I'm interested to see what lineups they run, especially with Kyle Kuzma. He's going to get a lot of run. You look at what Kristaps Porzingis could be for them if he comes back healthy this season. I think the Wizards have a few interesting young players. Of course, Bradley Beal out for the year, so they're not going to really push for that play-in spot. But I do think there is some stuff that they can really figure out this year with some of their young guys. Sacramento Kings, it's all about trying to figure out Sabonis and Fox, their chemistry together. Fox has not been dishing out assists with Sabonis in there. Of course, the offense is going to run through DeMontis. And I think Sacramento, fun, frisky, probably not a play-in team, though. The New York Knicks as well, another team that I just don't see as a play-in team. They've got some decent players, but regression to the mean has hit this team hard. Julius Randle has definitely taken a step back from where he was last year when he made an All-NBA team. Fournier, Kemba Walker, I just don't think they really did what the Knicks had hoped they would do for them. And then you also see a little bit of difficulty with them defensively. RJ Barrett hasn't stood out this year as much as you would have hoped. Spurs, they've got some nice pieces. DeJounte Murray, all-star level player. He's been great. McDermott as well doesn't get enough of his praises sung for how well he's shooting the three ball this year. I believe he's second in the entire league in three-point percentage at this point. Really, really solid team. They just don't have that player to really push them over the top here and make the play. And I don't think specifically on the wing, I was hoping for a bigger step forward from Keldon Johnson this season and Devin Vassell. Just haven't really gotten that. And then you look at the New Orleans Pelicans here. They brought in CJ McCollum. They're really the definition of fun and frisky, because if they get Zion Williamson back, I think they could push for the play-in spot. And at this point, with what I have here in my fun and frisky, there is going to be one Western Conference team that does get into the play-in. When you consider what I have excluded here, I only have one team in the play-in as a losing team so far at this point. So I think between Sacramento, San Antonio, and New Orleans, I would opt for New Orleans there, just because I think McCollum, and if they get a Zion Williamson back at any point, it pushes them enough over these other teams to slide into the 10th spot. Then we go into the teams that I think are going to lose in the play-in. And out east, it's pretty obvious to me. I think Atlanta, just defensive deficiencies in their offense when Trae Young goes out of the game, I just don't trust it enough. They've been playing better since they traded Cam Reddish, but holistically, I just don't believe in this team enough. Atlanta fans, don't get mad. Okay, I don't think that 2 years ago, or the last playoffs, was really a fluke. I just think this team, there's issues with designed roles right now. And I think that's going to really come into play when we get into the play-in tournament. And then you also look at the Charlotte Hornets here. I would have loved for them to pick up a rim protector. They opted for Montrezl Harrell. I think Jakob Poeltl would have really moved the needle for this team for me. But without rim protection consistently, the Hornets, they're a fun team. I really like LaMelo Ball. I just don't see them making the playoffs. And then another second-year counterpart to LaMelo Ball, Anthony Edwards. The Wolves right now are 7th in the West, and I am not buying into it. I think they're going to lose in the play-in, which means I believe that they're going to lose 2 games. Those teams on the right there, if they finish 9 and 10 in the Eastern Conference, they both only have to lose 1 game to be out. I think the Wolves lose 2, and we'll talk about why a little bit later on in this video. But specifically, when you look at the teams they're probably going to have to go up against, you have the Clippers, who are currently 8th. Paul George is going to be good for a 45 piece in that one. When you consider what Karl Anthony Towns does defensively, they're going to put PG in a whole bunch of pick and rolls, and he's going to eat in the mid-range area. I just foresee it right now. And remember, this is my own subjective opinion. Very possible you disagree with me. And if you do, let me know in the comment section. You don't have to get all feisty about it, okay? It's subjective. But for me, the Wolves, I just think their drop defense with Cat is going to be problematic against Paul George and the Clippers. And then I ultimately think if they get into a play-in situation for the 8th seed and you're facing LeBron in a single game elimination format, you're probably not going to come out ahead of that. If you're Minnesota, they've had a great season. This would not be a disappointment to me. If they didn't make the playoffs and just simply lost in the play-in, I don't think that's a disappointment. They've shown a ton of improvement under head coach Chris Finch. I think the Wolves have a very high ceiling in the future. Just ultimately for me, I wouldn't take them over the Clippers or the Lakers, who both of those squads have been extremely injured this year and they've had their own issues. And yet the Wolves really haven't pulled away despite having a really good starting lineup, with Jared Vanderbilt really being the missing piece there that's really cemented that lineup for them. I just still don't believe it. I still don't believe that the Wolves have enough in a one-game playoff scenario against either of those two teams. Which brings us here to our first-round exits, and I want to emphasize, I don't have any shame in these teams. The NBA is extremely deep right now. There's a ton of competition. There's a ton of parity in the league. The league is about as good as it's ever been in terms of balance, how good certain teams are. I think there's a ton of talented players, and I think there's a ton of talented teams as well, that there's going to be a ton of battling. So there's going to be some guys, some teams in here that maybe if you're a fan of, you're going to be like, whoa, I can't believe you have them as a first round exit. And one thing here is I'm not taking in playoff seeding right now because there's a ton that can change. I mean, the Eastern Conference, the team that's the A seed right now, the Brooklyn Nets, could end up being the 2 seed by the end of the regular season. That's how bunched up everything is. So I'm not looking at playoff matchups here. I'm just picking my top teams from each side, and very possible that, you know, the Nets play a team in round 1 that I also have losing potentially. So you're looking at a few different things where I have 2 teams here that I don't see moving on that play each other. One of them by definition then would have to move on. I didn't take that into account. I'm just taking my top teams from each conference as we go through this. So for my first round exits, number 16, I have the Los Angeles Lakers. I think they'll be the worst team to make the playoffs. and it's all about Russ. There's just no fit there. I talked about it in the offseason. I think LeBron's enough to get them in. I just don't think he has enough to get them through. And that's really going to become the issue here. I think Russell Westbrook, this will be his final season with the Lakers, and he'll be on his 5th team in 5 seasons because he's just that type of player now at this point in his career. Doesn't coexist well with stars. We've seen it with the Wizards. We saw it with the Rockets, and we've seen it this year with the Lakers now. It's just not going to work. They need to give up on it. And I think ultimately a first-round exit is going to be enough to push him out the door. Moving to number 15 here, we got the Denver Nuggets at this point. And this is going to seem low to a lot of people, but hear me out on it. Jamal Murray's coming back from a really serious injury. It's about to be probably 80% of what he was. And Nuggets basketball is really predicated on him and Jokic in the pick and roll. Think about when they upset the Clippers in the bubble. It was a ton of pick and roll usage. And it's to the point where we actually see Murray at certain points out averaging Jokic in assists and points, which is not something you'd usually expect based off of how good Jokic is during the regular season, but it's because of their style change. Stylistically, they run through Murray with Jokic involved in a 2-man game. And with Murray being at only 80%, I just think the ceiling of this team is much lower. Also, I don't know what Michael Porter Jr. is going to be, and it's a really tough Western Conference still. It's a very deep conference, and I just don't think the Nuggets have what it takes, especially with the question marks around Jamal Murray. Moving to 14 here, I've got the Toronto Raptors. They've had a really good season this year. I like what they have in terms of their holistic lineups, their closing lineups. You're going to look at guys like Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam. They also brought in Thaddeus Young, Scotty Barnes. I didn't even mention him, one of my favorite players in the league, one of my favorite players from this past draft class. He's been phenomenal for the Raptors as well. This Raptors team is deep. They've got length. They can defend. Nick Nurse is a genius head coach. Just ultimately, I don't know if they have the guy yet. I think Scotty Barnes could potentially develop into a high-end all-star. But at this point, I just don't know if I could rely on Pascal Siakam in an extremely deep East. It hurts me to not have the Raptors move on, but there's going to be some even more painful ones that I didn't have them moving on to the second round, even more painful than the Toronto Raptors losing in round 1. So Raptors fans, bear with me here. I think you guys are great. I think you are very competitive, and I probably see your series in round 1 going to probably 6 games, maybe even 7. Just probably don't have enough to actually get the job done for me at this point. Moving on now to 13, I've got the Boston Celtics here. Again, same thing for the Raptors, except in reverse, basically, because you're looking here at the Celtics. I love what they have as their 1-2 punch in Tatum and Brown. I just don't know if they have enough besides those two guys. Derek White definitely is an improvement over Josh Richardson, but at the end of the day, I don't know if I can really trust the rest of their guys, especially on the defensive end of the floor as much as I would like to. The Celtics, they've been really good defensively this year, top 5 in rating on the defensive end of the floor. Ime Udoka's proving to be a good head coach. They've been really hot as of late. 9 out of their last 10 games have been wins. The only issue for me with the Celtics is playoff basketball. Everything kind of slows down a little bit. Jason Tatum's going to take a few bad shots. I don't think that's going to be a surprise to Celtics fans. Jaylen Brown will as well. And it's just tough. In the East, it's tough to move on. This is not a jab at the Celtics. They're a really good team. It's just a better Eastern Conference than we've ever seen, basically since Michael Jordan. Moving on to number 12, I got the Utah Jazz here, and this is going to be one of the biggest surprises. Of course, they're top 4 in the Western Conference right now. I just don't buy it. When you get to playoff basketball, a team's going to spread you out. And the issue isn't Rudy Gobert. The issue is everyone around Rudy Gobert. Bojan Bogdanovic, not a great defender. Donovan Mitchell doesn't buy in defensively. Mike Conley used to be a really good defender, isn't anymore. Royce O'Neal's really their only consistent perimeter defender, and when he's on the floor, their offense definitely isn't as good as it is when guys like Jordan Clarkson are in. Of course, you had the Joe Ingles trade as well now. I don't know what Nickeil Alexander-Walker is really going to consistently give you. I don't think he's going to be one of Quinn Snyder's favorites. And I ultimately think a first-round exit this year, which is what I'm projecting for the Utah Jazz at this point, is enough to get Quinn Snyder fired and potentially Rudy Gobert traded. So there's going to be a lot in Utah. There's going to be a lot of blame, finger pointing. And at the end of the day, if it does pan out this way, if the Utah Jazz only end up being the 12th best team in the league and they get bounced in the first round, I think that Danny Ainge is going to clear some house and try and rebuild this thing around Donovan Mitchell. Moving into 11, another first round exit team here. I have the Los Angeles Clippers. And I know some of you are going to say, whoa, you have them above the Jazz in your power rankings. Yes, I do. If you have a healthy Paul George, this team's better than Utah. We saw it last playoffs, and we'll see it again. They've got a ton of nice players on this team. I like Luke Kennard. I like Marcus Morris. I like Paul George. I like Norm Powell. I also like Reggie Jackson. I like Zubats in spot minutes. I hope that they don't go so switch heavy in the playoffs, especially if there is no Kawhi Leonard. But this team just has enough of everything. Terrence Mann as well, I didn't even name. Nick Batum. They've got players who can make shots. They got players who can put the ball on the deck. And ultimately, Paul George, he's still a killer. I know he gets a lot of memes about him for his playoff performances. But at the end of the day, he's a really good player. And I think he's someone I would put my trust in over what the Utah Jazz are currently putting out, because I think the Clippers are going to be a little bit more competitive defensively, especially on the perimeter. And then I think offensively, they have more of a true identity about how they're going to get shots up. Number 10, we've got the Cleveland Cavaliers, and this is another one that pained me here. Cavaliers, they're having a phenomenal season. But at the end of the day, sometimes playoffs come down to experience, and you have a point guard in Darius Garland without experience. Karis LeVert hasn't played very many playoff minutes in his life. You also look at Evan Mobley, who's a rookie. Jarrett Allen hasn't played a ton of playoff basketball. Lauri Markkanen hasn't played playoff basketball. I mean, the Cavaliers are good. I just don't know if they have that extra gear to them yet that they're going to be able to win a playoff series. And JB Bickerstaff hasn't been a head coach for a playoff series before. The Cavaliers are awesome. I think JB Bickerstaff should probably be head coach of the year. I just think come playoff time, it's a little bit of a different battle. It pains me to leave him off. I think if they had Ricky Rubio, it would help a little bit come playoff time. But of course, with his injury, they had to move on from him. I totally understand it. Just Cleveland, again, this isn't a disappointment. This isn't shame. They had a great season, even if they get bounced in round one. And then number 9, this is the surprising one, Brooklyn Nets. And I know some people probably just about fell out of the chair here. How could I have Kevin Durant losing in the first round? Well, look at the Brooklyn Nets. What do you really have? Andre Drummond, he's on the Lakers last year, didn't really move the needle for them in round one. Nick Claxton, I mean, does he move the needle for you? I like Seth Curry a lot. Seth Curry's a very good player. I like Kevin Durant a ton, obviously, as a player. He's one of the best players in the world. But outside of that, I don't know what I'm getting from Ben Simmons. Kyrie Irving probably won't even play half the series. They're currently 8th in the East. And I think they're setting themselves up for a really tough playoff series against potentially a team like the Bulls or the Bucks or the Heat. Now, I know I said I'm not taking in playoff seeding to account, but I think for the Nets, it is slightly important that you get a decent round one matchup, especially when you have all these new pieces coming in. There's going to be almost no chemistry coming in. I mean, at most, the Nets are going to have their whole roster together for like 10 games, if you include Kyrie Irving. You're going to have a whole bunch of inconsistency, lack of chemistry in the Nets. I think they're the best team to get bounced in round one because of Kevin Durant, because of how good Ben Simmons can be defensively, because of how good Kyrie Irving can be when he's available. There's just too many questions for me. And for a video I'm putting on the internet here, I don't want to overbuy into them and then have them get bounced in round one. I'm going with my gut here. I know this is risky because I'm betting against Kevin Durant. They're the best team to lose in round one, and I feel fairly confident in that. Moving on to the teams that are going to be in the second round, but bounced in that second round. I think it gets a little bit easier and clearer here for me about which teams get bounced here, starting with the Memphis Grizzlies. I like what they have. They're really great in transition. Ja Morant is that dude. I loved him as a player coming out of Murray State. I think that this Grizzlies team is legit. Thing for me, though, is last playoffs, I mean, they only pushed the Jazz to 5 games. They were young. They weren't quite ready. I think they're more ready this year, which is why I have them getting to the second round. They've clearly taken a big step up. Desmond Bane's a big reason why. But when you get into a playoff series, I feel like they just lack a little bit of wing scoring. That's going to be a consistent go-to for them come playoff time. And I think that limits them just a little bit. Ja Morant's great. I like what the Grizzlies are. I just think they're maybe half a piece away from really pushing into the conference finals. And again, to lose in the second round is not bad. Okay. If they could be 1 game away from making the conference finals. They could be 2 games away. That is not a disappointing season, especially for a team last year that went from a play-in team to a second round team. That is extremely impressive, and the Grizzlies deserve those roses. They've been extremely great this season. Moving to 7, I've got the Chicago Bulls, another team that Bulls fans are going to be like, whoa, we're not going to be bounced in the second round. We're the 1 seed right now. We've won 5 straight games, even without Lonzo and Caruso. And it's true. This is why this is so tough. Okay, this is subjective and it's extremely difficult. I want you to go look at the Eastern Conference right now and tell me which teams you feel super confident about and pick them over other teams. It's so hard. Okay, I'm talking, 1 or 2 game series where that's, probably best of 6 or best of 7, first team to 4. I mean, it's going to be tough. Okay. The Bulls, really, really talented. I like their roster. My question is, how well do they protect the rim? Can Nikola Vucevic really be the guy, especially when you have to go up against Giannis, when you have to go up against Joel Embiid? I think that's where they probably get taken advantage of a little bit more than they would like. And I think the Bulls just fall short very closely and narrowly to some of the best teams in the NBA. Moving into 6, I've got the Dallas Mavericks here. And I know some people are going to say, whoa, another team that hasn't been out of the first round. True. But what they have done, even without a healthy Kristaps Porzingis and a very, limited Kristaps Porzingis from Clippers series, and of course they don't have him anymore, I don't even think that's going to be too much of a negative for them based off what he gave them in the playoffs a couple seasons ago. The Mavericks, they have Luka Doncic, and that's all that matters. Okay, he averages a 35-point triple-double in the playoffs, and I think that continues here. And he did that against Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. Whatever matchup they pull in the first round, if it's the Jazz, they're going to walk through the Jazz, in my opinion. I don't think there's anyone on the Jazz who can stop Luka Doncic on the perimeter. And I think there's a bunch of other teams that would struggle against Luka and the Mavericks. I don't think the Grizzlies really would have an answer for Luka Doncic. And I think ultimately, Luka and the Mavericks get really close. I just think that they're, again, another consistent wing scorer and another consistent big away from being able to push into the Western Conference Finals. But again, this is not a disappointing season. To get to the second round and push a team in the second round series, that is a win if you're Dallas. Moving on to pick number 5, we've got the Miami Heat here. And again, it's going to say, whoa. You have the Miami Heat not making the conference finals? I know. It's extremely tough to pick against Miami. They have a ton of really good players. My question is, where is their top end guy? Jimmy Butler, really, really good. Kyle Lowry, really good. Tyler Hero, very good. Everyone on this team is good. I just don't know if they have that mega superstar. Of course, we saw the Heat overcome that in the bubble. But do I see another one of those runs where they get to the conference finals? I'm a little more skeptical, especially with some of the other moves out in the Eastern Conference, especially at this trade deadline. I think the Heat are really great. I just don't know if they're great enough. I think it's going to be a 7-game series and they lose a very close game in Game 7 to whichever team they ultimately get outplayed by to get to the conference finals. Again, I'm not taking playoff seeding into account, so very possible they can make it still if the 2 teams above them end up playing each other in the second round instead. Moving on now to my conference finals teams. 4 teams left, and the 4th best team in the league right now is the Philadelphia 76ers to me, and that's without seeing Harden and Embiid play together. This is purely off of the talent on this roster. I look at this team, the fact that they were able to keep Matisse Thybulle, keep Tyrese Maxey was a massive win to me. You have good defensive players. Joel Embiid is one of the best defensive bigs in the league. You have Matisse Thybulle, who's one of the best defensive players in the league, period. You also have Tyrese Maxey, who at the end of the day, quite frankly, doesn't care. He's got a killer attitude, killer mentality, and that's huge for Philadelphia. And you got James Harden, who's one of the best ISO one-on-one players of all time, not just in the league, of all time. He's one of the best scorers to ever play the game. Joel Embiid, one of the best post scorers to ever play the game. It's tough to see teams match up well with that. Okay. The Bulls, are you really going to throw Vucevic at Joel Embiid? I mean, I don't know. Alex Caruso, can he punk James Harden a little bit? Maybe, but Harden probably still scores 30 a game in that series. And I think there's a lot of hate around James Harden as a playoff player. In his career in Houston, he averaged 28 points a game in the postseason. Okay, that's like a dream career for most guys. He averaged 28 a game in Houston in the playoffs. He is a very good playoff player. Now, I know he's had some lackluster performances in big moments, but at the end of the day, the Rockets made it to the conference finals twice with him, and I think the 76ers will do that again this year with him and Joel Embiid. Moving on to number 3 here, we got the Phoenix Suns, and this one was really hard for me. I think Phoenix is good enough to get to the finals. It's just, you're picking between them and Golden State. To me, Golden State, I think that they just have a narrow edge above them with their ability to play more of a freestyle motion offense. And I think ultimately at the end of the day too, if Draymond Green's healthy, which is what I'm projecting, I think that the Warriors death lineup wreaks a little bit of havoc for DeAndre Ayton and the Phoenix Suns. There's just too much talent there in Golden State for me. I love what Phoenix has. Phoenix is a really, really good team. They've been really well constructed. One of the best teams in the league for sure. That's indicated by their record, 47-10 at the day I'm recording this. They deserve all the credit in the world, and being the third best team in the league, that is not shabby at all. Which leads me here to my finals matchup. And of course, for those that have been keeping track at home, that's the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Golden State Warriors. We have the reigning champions versus the team that represented 5 of the last 10 NBA finals for the Western Conference. Warriors, they're back. Klay Thompson's healthy. They found their depth again. They've had really good contributions from some young players, and they've done it without James Wiseman even. Draymond Green's been injured. They've still been winning. Klay Thompson, of course, didn't play to start the year. They've been winning. Jordan Poole is everything they need off the bench. And then they have Steph Curry. This team is great. And the Bucks, they're kind of the counterpoint to it, where they're going to play big, they're going to play hard, they're going to play fast, and they're going to play strong. And it's going to be tough to deal with. This is going to be a great series. Ultimately, in a series between these two teams, it's tough. I'm going to opt for the Warriors narrowly. I think in 7 games, I think the Warriors pull it out. And the one thing I want to point out again, I think this is the most competitive the NBA has been for a while. I think there is so much parity in the league right now that I wouldn't be surprised if both of these teams somehow got bounced in the second round of the playoffs. The two teams I consider to be finals favorites right now would not shock me if they're not playing in the conference finals. That is how good the NBA is, okay? The NBA is extremely good. It's deep. There's a ton of balance, and I love it. This NBA playoffs is going to be phenomenal. And again, this is not based off playoff seeding, so there's a ton that could change. If somehow the Warriors face the Suns, obviously one of those two teams is not going to make the conference finals if they play each other in round 2. So hopefully that does make sense to you guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, because remember, it is subjective. You guys could have completely different opinions, and very possibly you could be right and I could be wrong. That's one of those things when you're making projections, there's always room for error. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe as well if you're new. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section, whether you have questions or whether you have your own opinions. Let me hear them. I'd love to have a little bit of dialogue with our viewers. Again, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.